Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Talking Stick. This is Jess, your daily hostess. How is everyone this week? The week after Thanksgiving, ramping up to our holiday experience of the year for Christmas and New Year's. Here we go. I decided this week that we're going to do, you know, uh, something that really is more relative to something a little bit fun, something that I really enjoy as an aspect of my own life, and it is the idea of divination, and the idea that prayer is a two-way street, and that for many years into ancient times, humans have wanted, believing in spirit, believing in God, believing that there is something greater than us out there. They want to get a response to the questions, to the asks, to the request, to the guidance. For me, I'm just really like, what do you want from me? um, Excuse me, I need to have my bangs trimmed, and they're just all over the place. But anyhow, wanting a response from the universe or from God when we are speaking so daily, so readily to Him, her, it, however you'd like to, state that. So what I'd like to do this week is actually today we're just going to talk about divination as a historical thing and the different types that are available. And I mean, there's going to be more than what I'll talk about here, but I'd really love to just sort of bring that, idea to the table and talk a little more about what this is and give that clarity. And then tomorrow, since I've been reading cards since I was like 16 years old, so for almost 30 years, I would like to talk about tarot and a little bit of a brief history of tarot, and then we'll go into a short reading as well as a few different types of cards that I actually own. We'll discuss that. And then likely the next day we'll talk a little bit about astrology and then perhaps mediumship or another type. Okay, so just to give you an idea, an overview of what the week should look like for us, that's it. So let's do it. Okay, divination is a practice that has been used since ancient times. The unpredictability of the world creates a desire to increase clarity so that we can make better decisions. Many think of divination as predicting the future, which is not a fact. Okay, so basically, it's looking at a need for clarity for the now, which people often will ask about the future as well, and what they'll receive is a singular trajectory based on what is happening in the now. So it's always something you can change, and I don't think people really understand that when it comes down to it. It's not telling you what's set in stone because we have free will. It's saying that if your mind, your perspective, and your choices do not change, this is a possible way that it will go, right? So that's just sort of a brief kind of perspective on that. So, predicting the future, I think, is a very sort of immature way to look at it. So, with that being said, let's move forward. The name divination comes from the Latin divinare, to foresee or foretell, and is related to the word divine. Many think that divination practices involve calling upon external forces that will provide answers to the questions. But in reality, you're really looking at it from a higher self point of view, not necessarily going out there. Now, for me, within us is a spark. Each one of us, every living thing, is sparked by divine, has divinity within. We are a child of God, right? We are brothers and sisters to Jesus. So I think he was trying to teach us that, whatever he had become in his lifetime, we also could as a human expression of the divine. So I kind of relate that here. So it's really about, again, your higher self. And from the earliest stages of civilization, people have used various means of divination to communicate when seeking help in their public and private lives. It is one of the primary practices used by shamans, seers, priests, medicine men, sorcerers, and witches. I don't like all those terms. I mean, it's also by, I guess, in the same realm, the layman. You can, as someone who is none of those things, use some of these tools to help find clarity within your own life and in your own mind and heart. Okay? So in the New Testament, the Magi reads the signs in the heavens to find the Christ child. Medieval kings and modern presidents have consulted with astrologers to determine the most propitious times for various events. Astrology was one of the very first sophisticated forms of divination, dating back to even ancient Mesopotamian, the times, like ancient times. And I mean, they had some pretty succinct knowledge of the stars that, I mean, even today we don't know or understand how they knew all of that. So, a few ancient forms of divination include tea reading. So, I don't know if you've heard of this, but it uses either the dregs of coffee or tea leaves in the bottom of a cup. After you drink the cup of tea or coffee. So, it's quite complex. It's not one that I've ever really gotten into. But for example, if it looks, at the bottom like a fish, then that can be a symbol of good luck, while a mountain may represent obstacles, right? So, sand divination. Now, this is something I actually am pretty interested in learning more about, utilizing, because I'm such a lover of the earth. So, using different forms of the earth to receive information. So, it's called geomancy, or reading the shapes in sand or stones. And it is one of the most beautiful of art forms, used frequently in ancient Muslim. It is said to read, the layers of the sand. Those who believe in geomancy are convinced of a vital energy or an aura of the earth. And when sand is thrown at random, either in the desert or onto a board, it can be used for divination. It is also important at this to know the codes of the geometric figures, right? So that's the part where you would have to learn. And the hexagrams of the I Ching are actually related to this. This sand divination as, an origin. They kind of use some of the same coding. So, and now tarot. It's not clear really when and where it actually derived itself from. But it is a very popular one. I know that on YouTube, if you look at my channel down below, I was actually reading cards up until my life came into that point of where everyone began to pass away. I tried to come back after my friend committed suicide, but then within a few months my daughter passed and I haven't been on since. So now I'm back here with this, and if you guys are interested, I could do like a weekly collective reading for everyone who comes to the page. I wouldn't mind doing that at all as one of our weekly meetings. So let me know down below if that's something you'd be interested in. But there are about 7,000 different decks at this point in time that all use the same basic code, which even the readers don't always understand. They're very symbolic, and like I said, tomorrow we will go over tarot. I will show you some of the cards. I'll do, a sort of mini reading so that you can see, if you've never had one, what that actually looks like and sounds like. And then we'll actually go into some of the other oracle cards. Like I said, I have many decks, and I'd love to share that, so I will. So beyond divinatory intent, it actually really kind of clarifies your current reality, and will bring to the table some of the more important aspects of reality today for the person that's being read for. The tarot is a book that summarizes all science, and in which all infinite combinations can solve problems. So I think it's really effective, and my cards really and I are really well, connected, and people are often very much helped by it. So to me, anything that helps people is something that can be considered of divine nature. Um, it's as long as it's not hurting anyone else in the process, then I just don't see anything wrong with it. So I kind of refuse to believe that it has, at least in my world, a negative a negative aspect. Okay, scrying. Scrying is probably one of the most ancient of methods, and it was used in my favorite place, Egypt, to the point of reading, they would actually use ink in water, but it's generally used, reflections in water, and reading that. So it does have a relativity to the crystal ball. And in ancient Mesopotamia, bowls were filled with oil, just like similarly to the ink of Egypt, the weighted liquid within the water. The Greeks found meaning in reflections on mirrors and metals, and while the Aztec read reflections in obsidian. The practice of scrying, again, led to the reading of crystals, and eventually in the characteristic crystal ball. So, yeah. This one I had never really heard of, and I thought was super cool. Prehistoric civilizations in the Americas possessed advanced knowledge of divination. Here, the practice was combined with sciences of astronomy and meteorology, and especially put toward the counting of time on calendars and to observe the life of crops. Predictions with grains of corn was a rather personal method of divination, similar to the sand. The grains are thrown onto a surface, preferably a canvas or water. These are then translated depending on the positions that they fall or whether they float or sink in water. The grains of corn could be different colors, and amongst all of the Indian cultures, the number of the kernels cast will be between 4 and 100. So this also, as with all divination, is related to the wonder that lies within the possibility of decoding the revolutions of our own energy. I like that. I like that way of explaining it. So with Egyptians, the primary divination was outside of scrying, were trance, mediumship, dream and dream interpretation, and oracles. So they used a lot of different, and so the Egyptian mystery schools would have that relative, information. Now, one of the least familiar methods, I've never even heard of this, so forgive me if I don't pronounce it correctly, but abacomancy, A-B-A-C-O, mancy, one of the most familiar, is one of the least familiar. And this uses sand, salt, or dust, and is around in many places up until today, especially in Africa. For instance, a fox walks over a certain part of a floor. You then lay a grid and divide it over the area. The animal's movements are interpreted. Interpreted. And so you throw the sand down and an animal walks over it, and the way that the animal walked is then a type of communication. So I think that's super cool, and is relative to the idea of animal speak in other native cultures. Tasseography is the method of divination that involves reading tea leaves. Okay, so we did already discuss that. That's what it's called. And it is practiced in ancient China, Greece, and the Middle East, as well as Europe. Bone readings, which is considered, most people think of like voodoo or something when you hear of this, and it sounds creepy at first, but there's been a massive surge of information brought about by the internet as encouraging the interest in bone reading divination. It is one of the earliest forms again, and is done in Africa, Asia, and America, and many other parts of the world. each specific bone has a meaning, and that relies on the traditions and cultures of the reader mostly. But I would assume that the way it falls and if it crosses other bones, that always, the combination effect of these cards or whatever you're reading often will also then hold another value outside of each individual bone or each individual card. So the combination effect. Candle wax, ceromancy. You use melted wax and then interpret the shapes that it forms. A good way to do this is using water again, asking a question, then lighting your colored candle and wait for a couple hours. Fill the bowl with water and then pour the candle wax, and as it hardens in the water, you can interpret. I never say that. I don't know why I'm suddenly saying that. Interpret the shapes, right? So another one, now this one, I don't know, unless you're a farmer and you actually have animals that you that you use for food. I just don't know how many people would actually do this. And I don't think because it would hurt another living thing for no real other reason. I don't suggest doing this unless you have plans to use that animal's parts for something else. But it's called haruspicy. This ancient divination form dates back to 9 to 600 BC. It contains instructions, or the Barutu writings contain instructions on how to practice this divination. This entails analyzing the entrails of sacrificial animals used for divination. The reader would interpret based on the shape, color, size, and texture of the organ. Okay, so as I said before, unless you have another reason, I'm not trying to promote the sacrificial abuse of animals or use of animals at this point in our realities. So, unless you are a hunter or something and you are out to hunt for food, I would say you could utilize this in that way and learn about it, but otherwise I'm not sure about promoting sacrificing animals. So, Libanomancy, which is the using incense smoke. So you first petition energetics and then light the incense as an offering. You then interpret the smoke's movement and study the patterns of the ash left behind to know and interpret significance. So the I Ching, the most famous Chinese form of divination in the West, this is throwing coins. There's the idea of the throwing of coins and observing how they land and interpreting the pattern. There's lots of information, and I believe that the coins actually do have patterns on them that bring additional messages as far as which ones fall where. But don't hold me to that because I do not practice this divination tool. There's lots of information about it if you are interested, though, and it's very easy to practice and has a wide variation of the types of questions it can answer. Runes, I'm actually very interested in the runes. They're stones with certain symbols that are carved or drawn onto them. The runes are derived from ancient German and Nordic tribes and are said to bring wisdom and insight about life and the future to the caster. There are various ways. You can draw from a bag, or there's different ways basically to utilize those. So again, look into it if you're interested. Chiromancy or palmistry is a form of divination where you read the lines and formulations on your hands to gain insight about your personality or perhaps your future. As the lines on your hand change over time, these are important indicators of past and future events as well as experiences. Now, my understanding is that I think it's the right or dominant hand is one that changes based on your experience, and then the non-dominant hand or left hand for me would be what you're born to live, so your life path as you are born. So if your hands become more similar as time goes on, I guess you're on your right path then, right? So yeah, there's still, again, many different perspectives on that as well. So again, look into it, lots of information. We are so blessed to be in the age of the internet, right? So, okay, dream interpretation is the method of decoding and analyzing the symbols presented in your dreams to gain insight into your subconscious and into the future. The best way to practice this is by keeping a dream journal and dictionary, journaling your dreams, and then referring to the dictionary to gain insight about yourself. Love that. Yeah. So, of course, there's stress dreams, and, I know I'll dream weird things about, like, if I watch something before bed on TV, I'll often have a dream that really has a relationship to that, and stuff like that. But I do still think, dream journaling and interpretation is very useful as a personal tool. So, graphology is analyzing handwriting. And they say that handwriting style can indicate much of our can be indicators of our emotional, mental, and subconscious states. And graphology is the practice of decoding a person's handwriting to understand the overall energy and state of being of the writer. Forensic handwriting is almost scientific, where law enforcement officials use handwriting to profile and identify potential suspects and criminals. Whoa, that's taking it pretty far. But let's see. Philomancy is using leaves. For example, observing how leaves fall from trees and the patterns they create is said to hold vital information. You can also throw leaves into water, and depending on how they land, this can also be an indication of events unfolding around you. So umancy is where you look into the patterns created when a raw egg is thrown into a glass of water. This has been commonly used to determine the fertility of an individual and whether a woman is pregnant or will fall pregnant. So that's pretty interesting. I guess that's better than, like, the use of, what was it? They used to inject the rabbit with the female's urine, and if the rabbit died, then you're pregnant, and if it didn't, then you're cool, or something like that, which is a little extra. So geomancy is one that uses objects to create a pattern unconsciously. So using a pen and paper, closing your eyes, and making dots on the paper with the pen, the pattern you create is said to hold insightful information. So again, I've never really looked into this one, but it sounds cool. Claromancy, this is tossing a coin, heads or tails. So, that one's self-explanatory, so that actually has a name. Numerology, we have discussed before on 1111, where you use the numbers of your name and your birth date to give insight into your personality and possibly your destiny. So you add the numbers together, in different patterns to find out different things. So the last one is that I thought was just kind of a fun one that, again, I've never heard of. It's called cromniomancy, and it is using onion sprouts. So you present the question or topic at hand and then observe and interpret the way the sprouts, the way that the sprouts sprout. So I don't know if you have to wait. I mean, I'd have to look more into that. Is it something you ask as you plant the onion and then you observe the sprouts over time? Seems pretty logical. But anyway, okay, so we just, went through a few interesting, I didn't, again, have any idea that there were so many of these. And I find it super cool, and I look forward to tomorrow where I get to share my personal favorite tarot. And there are so many readers on the YouTube platform now. So yeah, there's plenty to look into, and lots of history, many different card types and themes to suit your own personal preferences. And so I look forward to tomorrow with you guys. So okay. Thanks so much again for being here, for being willing to show, grow, and glow together, and for, supporting the channel. I appreciate you guys so very much. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you're so inclined. And If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to put below, please do. I'd love that. And also, if you have something private you'd like to say, the Talking Stick Collective at Gmail. Okay? Alrighty. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye-bye.